there's something about me, some sort of electromechanical force that draws chatty, somewhat unbalanced people to want to engage me. I may look like a therapist, but I'm not. I find that no matter what I'm doing, they like to glom onto me and tell me their stories of woe and their gripes against the world. Typically, this is going to happen on Metro North, or on a bus, or in the sauna at the New York Sports Club in Baldwin Place. Now, let me tell you one of the most unnerving stories. It was a Metro North story. I got on the train at Grand Central, and I was sitting in some of the facing seats, and there were some Japanese tourists there, women with a lot of shopping bags. And they kind of moved their bags around. It was a crowded train, and I sat down. And then at 125th Street, another man gets on, and he says, hey, I can move your bags, put them on the upper rack. And they didn't quite understand what he was saying, so he got very belligerent sounding. And he said, okay, I'm just going to go stand in the vestibule. And the women finally kind of got the point, and he put the bags up on the rack, and we're all kind of there. And I'm sitting like right across from this guy, and my knees and his knees perfectly aligned. And the train's kind of going along, and he starts complaining about the train. And he says, you know, after World War II, the Japanese and the Germans got the best train technology. And here we are in Metro North. We're using technology from the 1840s. And I try to stay kind of neutral, and I say, well, you know, the Japanese and the Germans had to pay a pretty high price to get access to that technology. And he looks at me and he says, well, if we didn't spend $7 trillion in the Middle East, we would have the money for infrastructure investment. So I can tell this guy is really getting a little cranked up. He had a chip on his shoulder about the size of the piano over here. And I knew it was just going to take one or two words, and he was going to either start swinging at me or his colon was going to explode. So I really didn't want to engage in him. But that didn't stop him. So then he starts talking about the 2008 recession and how all the real estate in Westchester took a big hit on that, and his house went down in value, and it never went up enough. And he said people aren't moving to Westchester because nobody wants to move here because the schools are becoming too diverse. He used another way of phrasing it, but I'll leave it at that. And so he had guys like him have to spend their money to send their kids to a private school while his real estate is not going up. So I was thinking like, whoa, like, I don't want to engage with you. So he finally got the point. I was reading a mystery novel, probably from here at the Katonah Library. He says, well, I see that you just want to read. And so he kind of was shut up for a station or two. But then he kind of starts again, and I don't answer any questions he asks me about who I am, where I'm from, what I do for a living. And my big fear was that he was also going to get off at Katonah, and our cars would be parked next to each other, and he would be haranguing me all the way to the parking lot about God knows what. Unfortunately, I think he got off in White Plains. So that was like kind of scary because these people know I can't get away if I'm on the train, and I wasn't quite ready to call 911 on him. Then a couple of months after that, I was in Israel on a tourist bus, and the man in front of me turns around and asks me, do you know what time it is? Which is a little bit like being at a bar and somebody says, hey, do you come here often? And so I was an idiot, and I told him what time it was. He immediately took this as an opening to start talking to me about his background. Turns out he was Italian. He'd moved to Australia, became an evangelical, and was in Israel to see the sights. And yeah, okay. But then he started talking about like the sign of the beast and the apocalypse in Jerusalem. And like, oh, so what religion are you, sir? And I said, you know, I don't really want to talk about this. So I'm just going to get back to my book. And that fortunately shut him up. Now, I don't want you to have the impression that I just totally push people away. Sometimes these conversations can be interesting. You know, I do have empathy. There are a lot of lonely people in the world. And some of those stories are going to be kind of interesting, and I'm going to, like, see what they have to say. You know, 30 minutes on the train is not a big waste of time. So, a couple of weeks ago, I was at the New York Sports Club, And I've noticed a guy out on the exercise floor, like kind of a big beefy guy exercising. He had on like a denim jacket with like Hell's Angels patches, motorcycle club patches, so kind of easily recognizable. And after I finished everything, I went into the sauna, kind of cooled off a little bit, and he comes in. Obviously, he didn't have on his motorcycle jacket. And he started talking to me. But this time, he actually was kind of interesting. It turns out that he had been a freelance sports writer back in the 80s and 90s. And so he was talking about his experiences writing about the Yankees. And so he was talking about being in the press box at Yankee Stadium, and there would always be food for the reporters. I'm a former reporter myself, and you always live for the food they provide. And he would say that the reporters would always line up and take their turn at the food bar, but they always let Phil Rizzuto go first. He was a Yankee player and broadcaster, very well respected. And they said, Phil, yeah, go ahead, get your food. We're not going to, we're fine with that. But then this guy said, there was this real estate guy, Trump, and he would go in there, and then he would go to the head of the line, kind of push everybody out of the way, because he wanted to get the food without waiting. And so it's like really bothered everybody. And this guy looked at me and said, he was just a creepy, creepy, creepy guy. I did articles about him, and he never liked what I wrote. So in this case, I do see him at the New York Sports Club. And so if I see him there, I'm going to say, hey, I like what you had to say. I'm a former reporter, let's talk shop a little bit. Because, I'm always okay with him talking about President Trump. I just don't want him to talk about Trump and the apocalypse at the same time. Thank you.